Stop. Don't skip this. I know exactly what you're about to do. You're about to scroll past this like every other video, telling yourself you'll come back later. But you won't, and deep down you already know that. Because this isn't just another video. This is one of those rare moments, the kind that most people miss, where something cuts through the noise, the distractions, the endless scrolling, and speaks directly to you. Not to everyone. To you. Right now, in this exact second, there are millions of people online. Millions of videos. Millions of signals competing for attention. And yet somehow you landed here. That's not random. What you're about to hear is connected to something ancient. Something most modern systems don't teach. Something that sits at the intersection of quantum reality and human consciousness. A truth that civilizations thousands of years ago understood in a way we are only beginning to rediscover today. And here's the part that might make you uncomfortable. But you need to hear it. There is a version of your life that you are actively moving toward right now. Not because you chose it consciously, but because of your patterns, your thoughts, your habits. And if nothing changes, that path will continue exactly as it is. Same struggles, same limitations, same results. But there are moments, rare moments, where you can interrupt that trajectory, where awareness becomes sharp enough to break the loop. This is one of those moments. But it won't feel dramatic, it won't come with a warning. It comes quietly like this. And most people ignore it. So before you scroll, before you decide this is not for you, ask yourself one question. What if this is the moment you were supposed to stop? Stay here. Because what you're about to understand might change how you see your life permanently. Before we go deeper, take 1 second, subscribe to the channel like this video, and drop a comment below. And here's your task: tell me which part of the United States you're watching from. I want to see how far this message is reaching. Because sometimes, the right message finds the right person at the right time. Everything you've been taught about reality has one major flaw. It treats the world as something fixed, external, and separate from you. You're told to work hard, react to circumstances, and adapt to what already exists. But very rarely are you taught that your perception, your focus, and your internal state are not just reacting to reality, they are influencing it. Modern science has already begun to uncover this. At the quantum level, reality behaves very differently than what we experience on the surface. Instead of solid objects, there are probabilities. Instead of certainty, there is potential. And most importantly, observation plays a role in determining outcomes. This is known as the observer effect. The idea that simply observing something can influence its state. Now think about what that means in practical terms. If your awareness affects reality at a fundamental level, then your thoughts are not passive. Your attention is not neutral. Where you focus consistently, something begins to organize. But here's where most people misunderstand this concept. They hear about manifestation, they hear about the law of attraction, and they reduce it to positive thinking. They assume that if they just think good thoughts, things will magically change. That's not how it works. Reality does not respond to surface-level thinking. It responds to deeply conditioned patterns, the beliefs and emotional states that operate automatically beneath your conscious awareness. This is why two people can use the same affirmations, the same techniques, and get completely different results. One sees change, the other sees nothing. Because one has aligned internally, and the other has not. Alignment means that your thoughts, your emotions, and your identity are all pointing in the same direction. There is no internal conflict, no contradiction. But most people live in contradiction. They say they want success, but they expect failure. They say they want abundance, but they feel scarcity. They say they want change, but they hold on to the identity that keeps them the same. And this creates resistance, not in a mystical sense, but in a practical, neurological, and behavioral sense. Your brain is wired to maintain consistency. It prefers what is familiar, even if it is limiting. So when you try to change your life without changing your identity, your brain pushes back. It brings up doubt, fear, hesitation. Not because you're incapable, but because you're unfamiliar. This is where ancient knowledge becomes relevant. Long before modern science, certain traditions understood that reality is not just physical, it is layered. There is the visible world, and there is the invisible structure behind it, patterns, frequencies, and states of consciousness that influence what becomes visible. And while the language was different, the core idea remains the same. Your internal state shapes your external experience. But here's the part most people ignore. Awareness alone does nothing. You can understand all of this intellectually, you can watch videos, read books, and still remain exactly where you are. Because information does not create change. Application does. The moment you begin to observe your own patterns, your reactions, your thoughts, your emotional triggers, something shifts. You move from being controlled by your patterns to seeing them. And once you can see something clearly, you can change it. This is the beginning of control. Not control over the world, but control over your response to it. And your response is everything. Because your response determines your next action. Your action determines your result, and your repeated results create your reality. So the real question is not, can you change your life? The real question is, are you willing to observe yourself honestly enough to see what is keeping you the same? Because most people aren't. They avoid it, they distract themselves, they blame external factors. And as long as they do that, nothing changes. But you're here. Which means at some level you're ready to look deeper. Right now, your life is following a pattern, not because it's meant to, not because it's destined, but because patterns repeat when they are not interrupted. Every day you wake up with a certain mindset. You think familiar thoughts, you respond in predictable ways, and without realizing it, you reinforce the same identity over and over again. This is how most people live, not consciously creating their life, but unconsciously repeating it. And here's the critical part: patterns feel normal. Even when they limit you, even when they frustrate you, even when you know you want something different, the familiar still feels more comfortable than the unknown. This is why change feels difficult. Not because it is impossible, but because it requires you to step outside of what feels normal. But there are moments, rare moments, where something disrupts that pattern. A realization, a shift in perspective, a moment where you see things differently. This is called an interruption. And interruptions are powerful because they create space. Space between your automatic reaction and your conscious choice. Most people don't use this space. They feel it for a second, and then they go back to their EOV patterns. But if you use it, if you pause, observe, and choose differently, something begins to change. This is where manifestation becomes real. Not as a concept, but as a process. Because every time you interrupt an old pattern and choose a new response, you are reinforcing a new identity. And identity is what shapes reality. Think about it this way. If you consistently respond to challenges with doubt, you reinforce the identity of someone who struggles. If you consistently respond with clarity and action, you reinforce the identity of someone who adapts and grows. Over time, these small shifts compound. They don't feel dramatic at first, but they build. And eventually, the version of you that once felt unfamiliar becomes normal. This is how transformation actually happens, not in one big moment, but through repeated, conscious decisions. And here's where it connects to the idea of quantum reality. Every decision you make is like selecting a path, not in a metaphorical sense, but in a practical one. Your choices determine your actions determine your results, and your results determine the direction of your life. So in a very real way, you are constantly collapsing possibilities into reality through your decisions. The question is, are you doing it consciously? Or are you letting your past patterns decide for you? Because if you don't choose, your conditioning will. And your conditioning is based on everything you've experienced so far. Your environment, your upbringing, your habits. Which means if nothing changes, nothing changes. But right now, you have awareness. You are not on autopilot. You are not distracted. You are here, listening, thinking. And that gives you an advantage, because awareness creates choice. And choice creates change. But only if you use it. So here's something practical you can apply immediately. The next time you catch yourself reacting automatically, whether it's doubt, frustration, hesitation, pause. Don't act immediately. Just observe. And then ask yourself one simple question. What would the version of me I want to become do in this moment? Not what feels easy. Not what feels right. What aligns with the person you're becoming. And then act on that. It will feel uncomfortable at first. That's normal. But that discomfort is a sign that you are stepping outside of your old identity. And every time you do that, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. This is the process. This is the shift. And it starts with a single interruption. Right now. At some point, awareness stops being enough. You've heard the ideas, you understand the patterns, you can see, at least to some degree, how your thoughts and behaviors have been shaping your life. But there comes a moment where all of that knowledge reaches a threshold, a point where it demands something from you. A decision, not a casual one, not a maybe I'll try this tomorrow kind of decision, but a clear internal shift where you stop observing your life from a distance and start directing it. Because here's the truth: most people avoid your life is not waiting to change. It is already moving. Right now, as you're listening to this, your future is unfolding based on what you repeatedly do, think, and believe. Not what you intend, not what you hope, but what you consistently reinforce. And if those patterns stay the same, your future will mirror your past, with slight variations, but the same core structure. This is where the concept of quantum possibility becomes practical. In theory, there are countless possible versions of your life, different outcomes, different paths, different identities, but in reality, you experience only one at a time. Why? Because your actions collapse possibility into experience. Every decision you make eliminates alternatives and strengthens a specific direction. So when you hesitate, when you delay, when you stay in uncertainty, you are not staying neutral. You are defaulting. Defaulting to your current identity, your current patterns, your current results. And over time, that default becomes your reality. But here's the part most people overlook. The moment you make a clear, committed decision, something shifts immediately, not externally, not yet, but internally. Your focus sharpens, your priorities change, your tolerance for distraction decreases. You begin to notice opportunities that align with your decision. This is not coincidence, it's alignment. Your brain, your perception, your behavior, all begin organizing around that decision. And the more consistent you are, the stronger that alignment becomes. But consistency is where most people fall off. Not because they don't want change, but because they underestimate what it takes to maintain it. They rely on motivation, which is temporary. What you need is structure. Structure in how you think, structure in how you act, structure in how you respond to challenges. Because challenges will come, not as a sign that you're on the wrong path, but as a test of whether your new identity is stable or not. If your identity is still weak, challenges will push you back into old patterns. But if your identity is strong, challenges will reinforce it. This is why the decision matters so much. Because the decision is not about a goal. It's about who you are choosing to be. And once that choice is made clearly, your actions must reflect it, not occasionally, not when it's convenient, consistently, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's inconvenient, even when you don't feel like it. Because your feelings will fluctuate, your environment will fluctuate, but your decision must remain stable. This is how you begin to collapse a new reality, not through one moment of insight, but through repeated alignment. And over time, something incredible happens. What once felt difficult becomes normal. What once felt unnatural becomes automatic. What once felt impossible becomes expected. And when that shift happens, your external reality begins to reflect it. Opportunities increase. Confidence stabilizes, results improve, not because the world suddenly changed, but because you did. And this is the turning point. The moment where you stop hoping for change and start becoming it. Now we reach the part that most people don't want to hear. Not because it's complicated, but because it's simple. And simplicity removes excuses. Most people will ignore everything you've just heard. Not because it's wrong. Not because it doesn't work. But because applying it requires something they're not willing to give: responsibility. Real responsibility. Not just for actions, but for thoughts, reactions, and identity. Because once you accept that your internal state influences your reality, you lose the ability to blame everything on external circumstances. And that's uncomfortable. It's easier to say, this is just how things are. It's easier to say, I'll start later. It's easier to stay where you are, even if it frustrates you. This is why most people stay stuck, not because they lack knowledge. And over time, that avoidance becomes a habit, a pattern, a loop. They watch content like this. They feel motivated for a moment. They think about changing, and then they go back to their routine. Same thoughts, same distractions, same results. And slowly, that initial awareness fades, until it feels like nothing ever changed. But here's the difference: right now, you are still aware. You are still listening, which means you are at a point of choice. And this choice is simple, but powerful. You can either take what you've learned, apply it, and begin shifting your identity, or do what most people do. Close this video, return to the Vizu's patterns, and let this moment pass. There is no middle ground, because not choosing is choosing. Now let's bring this back to something practical. What do you actually do from here? First, you start observing yourself daily, not judging, not criticizing, observing your thoughts, your reactions, your patterns, because awareness is the foundation of change. Second, you define the identity you are stepping into. Not vaguely, clearly. Who are you becoming? How do you think? How do you act? What do you no longer tolerate? Third, you align your actions with that identity, daily, not perfectly, but consistently, because consistency builds belief, and belief stabilizes identity. Fourth, you stop waiting for the right moment. This is the moment, not tomorrow, not next week, now. Because if you don't act now, you are reinforcing the habit of delay. And delay is one of the strongest patterns keeping people stuck. Finally, you accept that this is a process. There will be resistance. There will be moments where you fall back. That's normal. What matters is how quickly you return to alignment. Because every time you do, you strengthen the new version of yourself. And over time, that version becomes your default. Now here's the final truth. Nothing you've heard today will matter unless you act on it. Not later. Not when you feel ready, now. Because moments like this, moments of clarity, awareness, and possibility, do not stay open forever, they pass. And when they pass, they take their energy with them. This is why the title matters. Tuth knows you're about to ignore this, because statistically most people will. But you don't have to be most people. You can be the one who stops, the one who listens, the one who acts. So take a second, pause, and decide, not what you want, but who you are becoming. Because that decision, right now, this is the moment most people don't recognize. Not because it isn't important, but because it doesn't look dramatic. There's no loud signal, no visible shift, no instant transformation, just you sitting here aware. And that's exactly why it matters. Because real change doesn't begin with something external. It begins with a decision that no one else can see. A quiet shift where you stop waiting and start choosing. This is the part where everything you've heard becomes real, or disappears completely. Because in a few minutes, this video will end. Your screen will change. Notifications will come back. Distractions will return. And life will try to pull you back into the same patterns you've been living in. Not because something is against you, but because that's what it's been trained to do. Your environment reinforces your RAUBV identity. Your habits reinforce your RADURLI behavior. Your thoughts reinforce your RADURDV reality. And if you're not aware, you'll slide right back into it. That's what happens to most people. They feel something while watching, but they don't anchor it. They don't act on it. And because of that, it fades. But this is where you separate yourself. Because right now, you have something most people don't use: conscious awareness. You can see the pattern. You can feel the shift. You know, at least on some level, that you are capable of more. And that awareness gives you a window. A small, powerful window where change is easier than it will be later. But that window is closing. Not because of time, but because of attention. The longer you wait, the more your focus shifts, the weaker this moment becomes. So the question is simple: what are you going to do with this moment? Not theoretically, practically. Because transformation is not built on ideas. It's built on action. Small, immediate, intentional action. So here's what you do right now. Before this video ends, you decide one thing. One clear shift you are going to make today. Not 10 things, not a list. One, something real, something measurable. Maybe it's how you start your morning. Maybe it's how you respond to challenges. Maybe it's finally taking action on something you've been delaying. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it aligns with the person you are becoming. And then you follow through. Today, not perfectly, but deliberately. Because the moment you act, something changes, not just externally, but internally. You prove to yourself that you are not stuck. You break the pattern, even if only slightly. And that small break is powerful, because once a pattern is broken, it can be changed. And once it's changed, it can be replaced. This is how real transformation begins, not with a massive leap, but with a single conscious step. And then another, until the new pattern becomes your reality. Now let's take this deeper. Because what you're doing here is more than just improving your life. You are shifting identity. You are moving from being someone who reacts to someone who chooses, from someone who waits to someone who acts, from someone who doubts to someone who builds certainty through action. And that shift changes everything, because identity determines behavior, behavior determines results, and results determine the direction of your life. So when you change identity, you change the entire trajectory. This is why this moment matters so much, because this is where identity begins to shift. Not when everything is perfect, not when you feel completely ready, but right here, in the middle of uncertainty. And here's the truth, you will never feel fully ready. There will always be doubt. There will always be hesitation. There will always be reasons to wait. But waiting does not create clarity. Action does. The more you act, the clearer things become. The more you move, the more momentum builds. And momentum is what carries you forward. Now think about this. A year from now, your life will look different. That's guaranteed. The only question is, how? Will it be different because you consciously changed direction? Or because you stayed the same and time passed anyway? Because time will pass no matter what. The difference is what you do with it. And that comes back to this moment, right now, this decision, this awareness, this choice. This is where your next phase begins, not tomorrow, not someday, now. So don't overthink this. Don't complicate it. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Just decide and act. Because the truth is simple, nothing changes until you do. And once you do, everything begins to follow.